Draymond shoots like he's wearing a backpack. He shoots like he's wearing a backpack of Charles Barkley's greatest highlights.
Yeah. Yeah. Justice for the blind, just something that'll find in the rhymes that are coming from my mind.
You know what? Let's stick with the Sixers here. This person doesn't end his career on the Sixers, but let's talk about Charles Barkley.
Yep.
I want to talk about Chuck because Chuck, again, very disrespected at this point in his life. People don't understand Chuck's greatness. Draymond has won championships, sure. Draymond can't hold a fucking candle to Charles Barkley all time in any form or fashion. Draymond shoots like he's wearing a backpack. He shoots like he's wearing a backpack of Charles Barkley's greatest highlights. You know what I mean? Which would be a backpack that weighs 1,000 pounds that Draymond can barely carry. That's why his shot is so fucking deformed, because he's been carrying that on his back. Charles Barkley, 14th in win shares all time. 14th in fucking win shares. Understand that when you're talking win shares, in a lot of respects, when you rank out like the top 10, 15 players, in some cases, you could almost just sort them by win share, and you would see it play out exactly that way, where MJ has the most win shares and LeBron has the second most win shares, and so on and so forth. And Charles is right up there. Every statistic favors Charles as one of the greatest players. 22 and 12 for his career, 4 assists, could run an offense around him, raises it in the playoffs. In the playoffs, is 23, 13, and 4. Really pushes the conversation forward for what a power forward can do. In today's NBA, I mean, if you watch Charles Barkley highlights, especially early on, before he becomes the back to the basket like pounder that he becomes, Charles is like LeBron before LeBron. You know what I mean?
Yep.
He is grabbing a rebound, going coast to coast, and either making the right pass or finishing in a very dynamic way. He's the MVP in 93 over MJ, and you could argue MJ deserves that MVP. But let me tell you something. Charles earns that fucking MVP. It's not that Charles doesn't deserve it. Charles has one of the best seasons of all time. They win 63 games, I think, on that Suns team that finishes in first place on the West. They go head to head with the Bulls. He loses in 6 games, and it has nothing to do with Charles playing poorly, because Charles is just a fucking has a dominant series. I think he scores 51 game against the Bulls. I mean, by all accounts, this is just, by every statistical measure, this is one of the greatest power forwards of all time. And in fact, there's a legitimate argument that this is the second greatest power forward of all time, right behind Tim Duncan. You could argue Karl Malone if you want. You could argue, I mean, I see people will argue Dirk, or people will argue KG, and that's all well and good. It's fine. But Charles is the gold standard for power forward greatness before Tim Duncan comes at 6 or 7 inches taller than Charles, mind you. 7 inches. Timmy is basically a center that could move just like a power forward, but moves better than a power forward when he first comes in. Well, Charles is a 6'4", I don't give a fuck what anyone says, is a 6'4" phenom that just dominates everyone in the light of Willis Reed. Would gobble rebounds. I mean, just was above the fucking rim. One of the most athletic players you'll ever see if you've ever watched the Charles Barkley highlight. Charles is by far one of the most athletic guys you will ever see, especially in his prime. And to his credit, even starts expanding his game, shooting three-pointers, especially towards the end of his career, becomes a three-point shooter. His last season, his last time in the playoffs is 98-99. And in the series that they lose, that the Rockets lose, he scores, I think he averages like 29 a game or something like that. And that's fucking crazy. You know what I mean? This is his last series in the playoffs, and he leaves it all out there, man. Charles is, Sir Charles. He puts his foot in his mouth, and I get it. It's so fucking easy to shit on Charles and pile on top of him. But damn, this is arguably one of the 20 best players of all time. And yeah, yeah. But what you got to say about Charles?
Yeah, incredibly underrated because he's become such a entertainer. And sometimes the joke is at his expense. Or I would say a lot of the time the joke is at his expense. So people, when people see him now, it's hard to envision him as like the force of nature that he was, and particularly because like they're always making fun of him about being fat and like eating donuts and cookies and stuff, but young Charles was a freight train, grabbing a rebound, going 95 feet and dunking on whoever was down there. And like he's quoted as like, if you take a charge of me, I'm going to try and kill you. So like, do it if you want to, but I'm cool with the foul because you're not going to do it again. And then, as you stated, in the early 90s or closer to the mid 90s, he changes from that, high-powered small forward to that back to the basket power forward, which they end up making the Barkley rule where you can't be in the post for more than 5 seconds because sometimes he couldn't even get the ball down there because they would double team him immediately, which was like even hard to do then with the illegal defense rules. But the defenses would pack it in, and so he would get the ball at like 19 feet and start posting up there, and just took his good old ass time to get close as he could to the rim and shoot the ball. But he was also a better passer than he ever got credit for. He wasn't always super interested in playing defense, but he has like a lot of really impressive shot blocks.
He grabs the ball out of the air a few times, if I'm not mistaken, right? A couple blocks where he just essentially grabs it out of the air and comes down.
And also, he especially when he was younger, would challenge the biggest, strongest guys in the league, which I think is, to his credit, his best attribute. As Chuck was never afraid. He's never, ever, ever afraid. And he wanted to be the guy, which I think sometimes was to his dismay. But it was like that back then. Like, you have the Pippen thing where he doesn't even go back into the game. Because the shot wasn't for him because it's my team. I did this. The same thing for Chuck. You would watch games, and you could see him. He'd inbound the ball, talk to whoever his point guard is at the time, like maybe Kevin Johnson, and he's telling him, "I'm gonna go down here. You're gonna give me the fucking ball because you haven't given it to me in a few plays." And the defense knows it's going to him now, so he's getting doubled and whatever. But he was a competitor. He was a competitor. That 93 series against the Bulls, it's just Michael again. It's like Chuck doesn't – I think Chuck's highest scoring game in that series is like a 40-point game.
Oh, 40, okay.
Yeah, that's the year that Michael drops the double nickel, the 55 against them. And his last 3 points come off and one against Charles Barkley at the end of the game to kind of like seal it. But that series, Michael's averaged 41 points a game. It's the highest average in a final series in league history. Like, he was probably at the height of his powers.
And they fucked him by giving the MVP award to somebody else. You know what I mean? Which, especially back in the 90s, just to make this point, there is a long story or history of Hakeem David Robinson. Oh, David Robinson's the MVP. Let me tell you why I'm better than David Robinson, and I'm gonna bust his ass now in the playoffs. And they shot Charles in the foot by saying, "Here's the MVP. Now go play Michael Jordan real quick." But go ahead. I'm sorry.
It doesn't take much.
All right, and we're back. We had some audio issues, mostly because Vic was disagreeing with me. I'm joking. He wasn't disagreeing with me. I just wanted to make the joke. All right. So where do we leave off? We were talking about Charles Barkley. I think we said it all. Just a really good player, and like a lot of other really good players in different era probably would have won something, but doesn't get remembered as he should because of who he is now. As sort of like an entertainer, and not a guy who is in the best shape. And I think if you see Blake Griffin is essentially is another version of Charles Barkley. Blake Griffin exists because Charles Blake Griffin can run because Charles walked, and Blake doesn't reach the height of Charles ever. At Blake's best, and I'm starting to paint the picture for why CP3 is great, but at Blake's best, he doesn't hold the candle to Charles. And I like Blake. He's a great player, and at this point, especially in his career, he's become later career Charles, who is just like, give me the ball here, and I'm going to back you down for a while and use my strength, and I'm going to get this bucket. But also has improved his handles, but the passing, that piece, the part that you can build an offense around these guys, around Blake, for example, is because Charles existed. So,
Justice for the blind, just something that'll find in the rhymes that are coming from my mind. Used to come